World War I is classed as an incredibly unique war, and one of the main reasons behind that is because it's one of the first instances of modern mass warfare that was fought on both land, sea, and air. Now, one thing that goes incredibly unnoticed in World War I, mostly because it quite frankly just isn't the largest component of it, are the battles that took place on the sea. Now, World War I is most notable for trench warfare, and because of that, areas such as sea battles are completely overshadowed in terms of just how important they were to the war and some of the inventions that cropped up during this time. World War II, on the other hand, is much more well regarded for its sea battles due to the fact that Britain had one of the biggest naval forces in Europe, alongside Germany also fighting with one of their biggest naval forces in Europe. But in World War I, some inventions that cropped up included an idea which surrounded camouflaging boats in the most strange and peculiar ways. In 1917, the Allies were losing hundreds of ships every month to the new threat of German U-boats. U-boats were incredibly deadly, and their submarines patrolled the waters of the United Kingdom, watching for ships to destroy and cut off merchant ships in particular. These ships were carrying food and military supplies, including ammunition and guns, that was vital for a sustained Allied war effort, and it was really important to them to defend this cargo because without it, Britain's war would be lost. But the real question is, how would you defend yourself from a U-boat? The U-boat was an incredibly large machine. It was the fastest moving on the water, it had the most powerful punch, so the only real way of avoiding a U-boat was simply to remain hidden at all costs. But how can you camouflage some of the largest ships known to man during this era? Enter an English artist named Norman Wilkinson, who had an incredible idea to try and protect these ships from U-boats. Now, during his time in wartime service in the Navy, Wilkinson realised that it was impossible to conceal vessels effectively at sea due to most of them being painted a uniform shade of black or grey. Now, we most commonly look at military camos in terms of neutral colours that try and blend into the natural world. You have your greys, you have your browns, you have your greens, and with that, they try to blend into the backdrop. But the problem is, with the weather at sea, particularly around British coasts, there was a constant rate of change, and no singular pattern of camouflage could hide these ships from a U-boat. So Wilkinson decided to break the fold using a form of art called cubism. He decided that a cubist painting, or cubist style painting, which involved sweeping lines, large geometric shapes, and lots of contrasts of colour, would actually manage to camouflage the ship more effectively than that of neutral colours. The goal of his camouflage also had a different intention. The camouflage came to be known as Dazzle Camouflage or Dazzle Camouflage in the USA, but the goal was not to conceal the boat, but it was actually instead to make it more difficult to estimate a target's speed, range, and heading, and as a result it would be more likely that the U-boats would see the target but actually miss the target. He explained to generals in 1919 that he intended Dazzle Camo to be more about misleading the enemy on the ship's course so they would take up a poor firing position and miss their shots. It was adopted very quickly in Britain and then followed by the United States with very little evaluation as to its effectiveness, and each ship got given a different dazzle pattern to avoid making classes of ships instantly recognizable to the enemy and thus far allow them to prioritize specific targets. The observation took place by a zoologist called John German Kerr, who actually put forward an application to British warships through Winston Churchill in 1914, and he explained that it was impossible to actually camouflage ships as a whole across the waterfronts due to the constant change of weather. So his proposal was to copy something similar to a giraffe, zebra, and jaguar. He was a zoologist at the time, and he believed that these patterns on land made it difficult for predators to attack them, and as such it would work on sea as well. Kerr also introduced the idea of counter-shading as an artistic technique to hide some of the weapons on the boat. For example, he proposed to paint ships grey guns on top and then gradient below into a white so the guns would disappear against a grey background, which was quite common on the British seas. Similarly, he advised painting shaded parts of the ship white and brightly lit parts in grey to smooth the grading between them and make some shapes and structures invisible. All of these letters that Kerr put forward to Churchill achieved nothing, but then later in November 1915, Kerr got a warm welcome from Norman Wilkinson, who was a Royal Naval Volunteer Reserve officer, and at this time they both agreed with each other that the Dazzle Camo was a potential way forward for naval camouflage. As a result of these theories and meetings between Kerr and Wilkinson, Wilkinson was put in charge of a fleet of ships that was 4,000 strong. Many of them were merchant ships and painted in what was known to be Dazzle Camo, and Dazzle actually applied to 400 naval fighting vessels starting in August 1917. There was a statistical analysis as to the effectiveness of Dazzle Camo that kind of ended up being inconclusive. Now, suggestively, it mentioned that 43% of Dazzle ships sank in comparison to 54 ships that were uncamouflaged, and similarly it also suggested that 41% of Dazzle ships were struck amidships compared to 52% of uncamouflaged ships. And whilst these comparisons seem to show a trend, at the same time Dazzle ships were attacked 1.47% more than the 1.12% of uncamouflaged ships, so showing that their effectiveness was somewhat in and out. And the problem as well with this is that Dazzle ships were 5,000 tons bigger than most uncamouflaged ships at a good percentage of the time due to them being cargo ships, so there was far too many factors to bring in. The choice of colour scheme, the size of the ships, the speed of the ships and the tactics used had all been varied for each individual ship, and as such Dazzle Camo was proven to be pretty much one of those things that we will never really know about. Was it effective? Was it not? It appears at this point in time we cannot draw conclusive evidence that Dazzle Camo was effective in World War I. Dazzle Camo continued to be used in through to World War II and is even being tested, or iterations of it are being tested ever since, because the idea of camouflaging armour and camouflaging ships is something that people want to do. Overall guys, I hope you enjoyed this video, which was a Tales from the Battlefield on Dazzle Camo and Norman Wilkinson. If you did, please leave a thumbs up and share it and subscribe, and as always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you again soon in another video.